Cool. Let's dive in. Let's see. This first resume we're going to look at, the note that they attached for me said, I just graduated from a boot camp in February. I finished my last job in education and uprooted my family to Boston after living for 11 years in South Korea. I'd like to hear feedback on how I talk about my current projects and how I should discuss my previous job in education. So I figured this would be a great resume for Katherine to help look at. So we're going to start with that. I like to start my resumes kind of zoomed out, kind of take a look at, how do they use their white space on the page, and sort of like balance on the page. First thing that kind of stands out to me is there's a lot of content on here. And these bullet points are huge. So I would probably, just as a first pass, I would probably try to simplify these bullet points a little bit. Katherine mentioned earlier, when you're looking at the employment section on LinkedIn, try to do things in bullet points, but also try to quantify information as well. I think that that's an important thing to do on a resume. And so that would be the first thing I'd probably do, is see if you can simplify those bullet points, keep some quantified information, and just make the page look less heavy as far as overall text. Katherine, any first impressions here?
Yeah, I would say that it's really good. It's clean, it's organized. I'm okay with the side panel. I usually don't use it or recommend it, but in this case, it's clean enough. Um, I would just say at the bottom, there seems to be a lot of white space. So maybe make it even, the top to the bottom, and then those side margins as well. So that way it's clean all the way around the page.
Okay, great. Yeah, because up here we can kind of see like the right margin stops about here, but then it kind of starts jutting out here over on the right side. And here's the interesting thing is, people that look at resumes, I mean, they don't come from like a graphic design background, but I studied a little bit of graphic design in school. And so I notice things like that and I can articulate why it doesn't look good. But most people looking at a resume, they're like, something's weird. Don't know what. Meh, pass. Um, and I've said this on the stream before. When they're looking at a resume, they're looking for a reason to say no, because they got a lot of these to look through. And so they're trying to narrow it down. They're trying to sort of like get a much smaller group of resumes before they go into actually screening calls. And so they're looking for a reason to say no. And anything that feels off about your resume, like, they're just going to pass. They may come back to it another time later on if you come up as another job hit. They were like, oh, here's this John person again. I remember seeing this resume before. Maybe I'll take a second look at it this time. But as a first pass, like first impression, sometimes they'll just go, nah, something's off. Can't say why. Can't really like articulate with words like what's wrong with the resume other than it just looks weird. And so like being aware of some of this stuff. This is why I like to go in and share some of those details. So yeah, I agree with the white balance, or the sort of the spacing. There's a lot of space here at the bottom, and a lot of the stuff here, even in the gray left bar, bumps right up against that. Both edges, like edge to edge text. I think you could probably like bring the margin in a little bit on that sidebar, just so vertically it goes a little bit longer on the page, and like maybe hit down to the very bottom of the page if possible, or closer to the bottom of the page. Cool. Let's zoom in and we'll take a look from here. I don't know if there's a way that I can get rid of this sidebar over here or not. I don't think I can. Nope. Present mode. Nope, that didn't work. Let's try. Nope. Okay, so I can't. I mean, I can zoom in a little bit more from there if we need to. Yeah, let's dive in a little bit more. So we see their name up here, kind of a different color. Their first name is in one color, their last name is in another color. Full stack web developer, and then a link to a website which they've anonymized. So it's just going over to google.com right now. And then they've got a summary here. They've got some technical projects, and then they've got their professional experience, and then additional experience down here at the bottom. So Katherine, now that we're zooming in on it, what sort of stands out about the text on the page, like what you see here?
Yeah, that was a really good call out around the last name being a different color. I have no idea if this is a link or not. And if it is a link, that's my first inclination because it's blue, but I'm wondering, what is this even connecting me to? Why is their last name linked? So I would immediately change that font color so that way it's consistent. The next thing that I'm looking at, that contact information, it's very easy to find. I do like that it's line by line rather than having it span across the page like I've seen on some resumes. The next thing that I would say is interest and hobbies is taking up quite a bit of real estate. And while those are good things to add, their professional experience is not that long. The technical projects, they only have two. I understand that this is a student, but I'm sure that there are other things that professionally will tell me more about you than those interests and hobbies. And while those are great to have, I just would say, if we're missing out on content that's going to help you get that job because we're trying to put interests and hobbies on here, I would use that real estate for something else.
So you think having an interest section where someone would list something like karate would not be appropriate. I have a specific reason for calling that one out. People on the stream will maybe get the joke, but Jonan from the Jonan show, he often talks about like having an interest in hobby thing like this on the resume to him is actually important. And so like when we talk about resume reviews, we always talk about like everybody's perspective is different and what everybody looks for in a resume is different. Jonan likes to see like, show me that you're human. You're not just, only work, project, nothing else. Like he actually really likes to see stuff that sort of differentiates you. Me personally, I would say like if you got to fill space with something and you really don't have anything else, then okay. But otherwise, like unless this is like a fitness company that you're applying to with this resume, adding like CrossFit, ultimate frisbee, hiking, things like that are not going to be as important to a company other than knowing that, okay, you've got good balance in life. Like you're not just all about work, all about projects and nothing else in life. I think it does show that you're happy to get in on some of that. I was a little curious about the video and board games where it says recreational and educational use. 'Cause, living in Colorado, the term recreational use has a bit of a different meaning for us out here, for different things. For some people, not me personally, but some people. But yeah, I would say like if you really need to fill room on the page and you literally have nothing else, then I think having an interest in hobby section is okay, just so it doesn't look empty. But I could also argue you could probably reformat away from the 2-column format and just have a single column format if you really are that light on content. But then looking at the other content on the page, I'm like, you got a lot of content, so you've got things that could fill the page otherwise. I would probably drop the interest in hobbies unless the job you're applying to is specifically looking for things like, it's an activity kind of company, or they're looking for fitness, background or something like that, then absolutely a lot of this stuff would apply.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be my take on that.
Yeah, I agree.
I think from a consistency point of view, like they've got a space around the dash on the dates for their bachelor's and their master's, but they don't for their code school. So like just being consistent with those things. Also, the dates on these two education, the date was on a separate line, where this one here, it's kind of in line with the name of the program. I would probably separate those. Also, you've got the name of the degree in, or like the type of degree in bold, and then what the degree was, and then the name of the school in italics. The formatting here is very different. And so I would probably structure it the same, like, whatever certificate or diploma or whatever they call it at the school, like put that in that same bold. And then like Coding Dojo is the name of the school in this case. And so that would be like more along the lines of this italicized font or something like that, where full stack development would be, this non-bold all caps kind of thing. So just keep the formatting consistent on that. Going back up here to the contact information, anybody looking at your resume knows that's a phone number, so you can get rid of the label. Depending on how you put your LinkedIn URL on here, you may not need to specifically call out that this was LinkedIn or this was GitHub, unless it's like a link where it's literally just the word LinkedIn, and when they click on that, it takes you over, or takes the person over to your LinkedIn profile. But another thing, maybe, Katherine, that we should mention about LinkedIn is how they can change their LinkedIn name, because by default, when you sign up, it asks like what kind of username do you want, but then there's usually like a dash and then a bunch of hexadecimal numbers at the end of that. You can go in and customize that to be whatever you like. Should we show them real quick how to do that on LinkedIn, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And I actually just changed mine from the default to match my personal website. So you all are welcome to visit me at pinkterminal.io. And I changed my LinkedIn URL to match that. So we can show them here. You're going to go to your home profile, and then it's up at the top right there for edit public profile.
Oh, so up here in the top right corner. Okay. Yep. And then it looks like it's still up here in the top right corner. So edit your custom URL, and this is where you can change what you want this to be. For me, the 736 is kind of a call out to my wife. It's kind of how we met. It's a long story. I'll go into it someday. But yeah, you can basically customize it from here and get rid of that default, because having that sort of hexadecimal thing on the end is it's kind of annoying, and it just makes it super long if you're actually trying to print out the URL somewhere. But I think if you can have like even just linkedin.com/in/Ian Douglas 736 or something. Don't put my profile in your resume. Put your profile in your resume. But if this won't fit in whatever contact area you've got on your page, like if this was too long to put on John's, resume to fill in this whole line, then just make it a clickable link and just link over to whatever your profile is. But test these links. Like when you build this and you export like a doc format or a PDF format, actually like open it up and click on the links. Make sure it's going to where you expect it to go. Otherwise, when they click on it, it's not going to go where they expect it to go or where you expect it's going to take them. So make sure to test that. So you can just come in here and you can modify this. And I think if you change it, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Catherine, if you change it, if someone goes to the old link, it'll redirect for a little while until someone else takes your old name. So similar to how GitHub does their redirect, if I go in and change my GitHub profile name from Ian Douglas to something else, anybody else going to github.com/Ian Douglas, they'll get redirected over to my new one. But as soon as a new Ian Douglas signs up, that redirect no longer works. And I think it's the same on LinkedIn as well. So I think it'll actually redirect from your old one to your new one. So if you've got old resumes out there, it shouldn't impact that. But something to kind of keep in mind there.
Yeah, that's true. And I just want to add on with the links in your resume. The other thing that I've seen is people will link to password gated profiles or portfolios. And that's never fun as a recruiter to go to that link and now realize you need to reach back out to that person to ask for that password. So make sure that nothing is protected in terms of, your portfolios and your links.
For me as a hiring manager, I'm not even going to reach out and ask for it. I'm just not going to look at it. I'm just not going to look at it
exactly.
At that point. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, that I'm calling because I'm looking specifically at that information, but I'm not going to call just to ask for that and then have to call you back later if I decide I want to get on a phone screen with you. If it's password protected or paywall protected or something like that, I'm just not going to look at it. I'm not going to get to see it. So make sure that when you test your links, you test them in like an incognito mode or some sort of privacy mode or something within your browser to make sure that anybody that's trying to get to that link, that they don't have to be logged in or anything like that. I think that would be good. Cool. All right, from there, so let's take a look at this summary. It says a software developer with over 10 years of international education, an agile learner, passionate about technology, eager to leverage global professional experiences, creativity, and expanding software development skills to create solutions, products, and services that have a meaningful impact on end users. Holy run-on sentence, Batman. Proficient in HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, JavaScript, Python, Django, SQLite, and Postgres. So I don't think you really need to tell me your technical skill stack here unless you can like build your own technical stack like skills section on a resume. I'd much rather see that than have to hunt around the whole page to try to find the skills. They do mention like Python, Django, Postgres, Bootstrap, but they don't mention SQLite anywhere after this point. JavaScript has a capital S, but I don't see JavaScript mentioned in any of this here at a glance. I kind of see Postgres buried again down here. So it's like really hard, like as someone technical to like look through here and go, what do you know? Also, if I'm looking for a full stack dev, you're probably going to want to rearrange this list in the order that they're looking for. Like if I'm looking for a Python dev and I see you're proficient in all these things, but Python is way down the list, I like inherently people that read a list when they're looking at lists of skills like this, anything at the beginning of that list, you know better than what's at the end of the list, in my opinion. And so if I'm looking for a Python developer and that's the fifth thing on your list, that tells me you're probably not as good at Python as I would hope you to be. Although in this case, you're listing 2 Python projects. So now I'm kind of waffling on like, okay, well, maybe you know Python because you've got 2 projects. But Python wasn't listed as your strongest suit. You're listing HTML and CSS and Bootstrap up front. And so that tells me you're more of a front-end developer who knows Python, the way that I would read that list. Any thoughts, Katherine, on that summary?
Yeah, that's a really good point in terms of breaking it down, recognizing that the front end skills are being listed first. I think we naturally do that. That's the way we count. We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when we're reading a list, we put more weight on whatever is number 1. And this is kind of what I was referring to when we look back at interests and hobbies. You mentioned before, that it can be really valuable to see that someone's a whole person. Totally agree. And we could move all of these skills into that section and have them listed by bullet point, and it would be really easy to identify what these skills are rather than coming across them after a couple of run-on sentences in the summary. So that might be another way of restructuring this.
I like that they're calling out their technical projects first and then kind of showing their professional experience. They are quantifying some information in here, but they're giving me a lot of information about kind of their teaching background, where it's a big part of who you are as a person, but that's not who you have become as a person. So it is a big part of your past, but as Katherine was talking about, like past, present, future, it's part of your past and a little bit of your present, but it's not what you want your future to be unless you're looking for a development role in like education technology or ed tech. And so trying to find a job where they're specifically looking for an ed tech sort of background. I don't know that you need to give this much information about what you taught and where you taught and all the things that you taught. I think you could probably reduce this quite a bit. I think that might help just cut down a little bit on the text.
Yeah, just a couple of other things to add in here. Looking again at this resume, up at the top we said 10 years in international education, and then I see the dates, we've got 2016 to 21, so 5 years, and then before that 4 years. That's a lot of experience. And when I look at how this resume is structured, the experience section is probably the same length as the technical projects. So with 10 years of experience, I expect to see a lot more on the page and structured by the different positions that were held. So whatever happened under humanities teacher, put that under there. Same thing with assistant athletic trainer, break them out as opposed to having just key achievements and highlights, because now I don't know which one was which. Going back to your point around some of the actual content though, listing that you worked with Schoology or Power School or these different technical platforms that probably aren't going to mean anything as you're transitioning into technology unless you're working for an ed tech company. It doesn't matter. There is kind of unnecessary detail that doesn't add a whole lot of value, and recruiters may not even know what those platforms are. So it doesn't signal anything to them unless you're doing an ed tech position. And so just recognizing that if this was better organized, it would become more obvious, immediate, and right off the bat that there's 10 years worth of experience that this person has. I had no idea until I actually read that wow, they have a deep career history and are now making that change. That was unclear to me. And so I just want to touch on a couple of other formatting things. You were talking about the dates and the location under the education side. I'm noticing some formatting issues under experience. So if we look at the dates here and how they're structured, we have no spaces in between 2016 and 2021, Same thing under additional experience, the 2011 to 2015. But then to your point, if we go back over to the Bachelor's of Art, we've got a gap on both sides. So be consistent in your formatting. Either you're putting a space around that dash in between your dates or you're not. But I've seen on so many resumes how there will be a discrepancy in that formatting. It's just noticing those little details that's going to tighten this up.
Yep. And even really tinier detail, for example, so they've got like this vertical bar separator, which I'm personally not a fan of. They've got a space on either side, but down on this date down here at the bottom, they've actually got two spaces on the right side before the 2011, 2015. And kind of going back to the dates, one thing that confused me a little bit is in the summary at the top, they say they've got over 10 years in international education. When I get to this role, I see that they were there for 5 years, but then they list two jobs that total 9 years, or did they do them at the same time? They did one of them for 4 years, and then like within a year, they started the other role. Like they've always been a humanities teacher, but then they started doing the athletic trainer role as well. Or was this 9 of the 10 years because this only adds up to 5? Like, again, it starts to get a little confusing. I do see additional experience down here at the bottom, which does seem to wrap up more than a decade of experience. But you may want to specify in here that these were like overlapping roles, or like maybe the years that you started each of these roles, so that they can see that you started the humanities teacher in 2016 and then maybe started the athletic trainer in from 2016 to 2020, or from 2017 to 2021, or something like that. Maybe just to help clarify a little bit, like when you did those roles, just to kind of clarify that timeline a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I agree with Catherine's point about like naming the tools on here. If they don't know the tools, then it's not going to be very helpful. Knowing how to use Zoom, I mean, that can be helpful if you're looking for a remote job. But if you're looking for a job sort of on premise with a company, you probably don't need to mention too many remote tools. But if you're looking for a remote job, mentioning that you're that you use tools like Discord and Google Meet and Zoom and things like that, I think would be a big plus to list. But again, I would make like a separate skills block where you're specifically calling out the technical skills that you have, the different libraries you've used, that sort of thing.
And just to add to
Cool.
that, there's a huge difference to me in saying, I know how to use Zoom, and assuming you're doing one-on-one conversations, or maybe, in this remote working environment, you're having your staff meetings on Zoom, versus you're hosting speaker series and having thousands of employees log into Zoom and having attendees and panelists and Q&A, and you're operating all of that. That's a very different skill set in my mind, and communicates something very different about your abilities versus I can log into Zoom and have a meeting, with my boss or with my team. So adding that additional context, if you really are advanced in that skill, changes the way the word Zoom or Excel or PowerPoint is received by someone viewing this resume.
Yep. I like that you're adding a GitHub link to your projects. Just keep in mind, GitHub has a capital H. So again, just little attention to detail on those things. Personally, if you could deploy that somewhere, like deploy it on Heroku or AWS or something, like get a free instance on AWS or something, and actually put your project online somewhere, and also link to that. I think that can be a really powerful indicator, because then I get to see that not only can you write code, you can write like whole working applications. Like this thing actually works, and I can go experience that. For me, when I'm evaluating stuff like that, that makes a much bigger impression than just looking at your code. I mean, I certainly want to go through and look at your code and look at your commit history and see, did you work on it with other people? What were the code reviews like? What was your process on GitHub like? Did you do like branching? Things like that. But I like to experience what people build, me personally. And so if you can get it live somewhere, I think that's actually even more powerful. So. Cool. Any last thoughts on this one, Katherine? We'll move on to another one.
Yeah, I'm actually really curious. What is your opinion on having the summary at the top? I've had different opinions be expressed about including a summary and if you should include it and what it's used for. So what do you think?
I would say if you need space on the page, the summary is the first thing to go. Well, the interest and hobbies would be the first thing to go, and then if you still need room, get rid of the summary. Because a resume is really just a list of facts about you that I need to look at really briefly to know, are you qualified for this job? Um, I mean, I tend to skip summary sections most of the time because if I'm looking at your resume to go, I'm looking for a Python developer that knows Bootstrap and some front end technologies. I just want to be able to look at this resume in a hurry and see if you've got that, how you've used those skills, maybe click through a couple of projects really quick and go, this is on my yes pile, or this is on my maybe pile, or this is on my no pile, and be able to screen that in a hurry. And so for me, I mean, I'm I've seen summaries like in that little thin sidebar as well, and that actually makes it really hard to read if it's really long. I mean, this summary would probably fill up, a pretty, like probably as much room as their education space if they were to put that summary over in that left sidebar. Um,
Mhm.
so I would say, like, if you really needed space on this side of the page, like if you wanted to put a skills block up at the top, I would probably drop the interests and hobbies, move the education down to the bottom of that sidebar, and put the summary where your education block is, because it's going to take up about that much room anyway. And so I put the summary
Mhm.
here. I would put your education here because me personally, I'm going to skip all that anyway. The stuff I care about is over here on the right side of the page, which is your skills block and like the work that you've done and the projects that you've worked on. Because for me as a hiring manager, that stuff is more important. But that's not the only person you have to please. And we've talked about that in other streams when we had who was on the show? Spencer was on the show and Aaron was on the show. And we were talking like from an HR perspective, what's important to them as HR representatives when they look at a resume is totally different from what I look for as an engineering manager looking at a resume. And you have to kind of please everybody, which is really hard to do when you got a one-page resume. And so you kind of have to balance that out a little bit for yourselves. And that's why I like to say on these resume reviews, like, don't just listen to me. Don't just listen to Katherine. Get a lot of opinions and figure out how you want to construct it for yourself. Because there's so many people that could potentially look at your resume and they're all going to be looking for something different. They need to be able to find that in a hurry. So what do they need to find and how easily can you make that found on the page? Um, so that would be kind of my take, kind of a long answer, but
Yeah,
I would say if you need space, summary is the first thing to toss on there.
that sounds good. And just one follow-up question to that. What if,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about people who've transitioned in their career or maybe don't have an accurate job title for the work that they're doing, can you use the summary as a place to provide explanation? So let's say in my current role, I'm an apprentice engineer, but I'm also fulfilling PM and TPM roles. And so anyone who sees that is going to be like, why is this happening? This doesn't make sense. Can
Mm-hmm.
you utilize the summary as a place to connect some dots that maybe aren't connected by the facts that are included in the rest of the content?
I would say if you need to draw that many lines and dots together, that would probably be your cover letter. The summary should tell me why I should call you for my specific role. And that's more of your present and your future and less about your past. So, like it's good to know you've got 10 years in educational or international education, for example, if you're applying for an ed tech kind of company. If you're not applying for a company that has anything to do at all with education, that that doesn't really help me in the summary to know whether I should call you. And so that summary needs to tell me like, who you are as a developer, why you care about what my company does, like why you care about the things that my company does, and how you're like a great fit for that. Like you need to summarize that in that summary, because if I do read it, I want to know like why are you someone I should call. Um, and so like most times when I talk about resumes and I talk about like make that really really long resume and then trim it down to one page, you're basically taking out everything that is irrelevant to that company for that role. It's really hard to make just a single generic resume that you're just going to send out to everybody, because it's not going to get by as many people as you think, because you're trying to be all things to all people. And that's not really possible with a single page, which is why you have to customize it for the company that you're applying to. And so for something like this, I would say, this would be a pretty decent resume if they were applying to, say, Guild Education in Denver. This would be a pretty decent resume because they've got a lot of education background and they're now a developer. They hire, they're really good about hiring entry level devs. So this might be an opportunity for them to go apply at Guild, for example. But, if I was looking at this, as part of Stream, for example, like that education background wouldn't help us. I mean, it would help me in my role at Stream. If I was hiring on my team, then I might give this person a call. But for most companies, like this isn't going to be as relevant, and so they're less likely to care that you've written that in your summary. So yeah, I would say that the summary, if you're going to put a summary in there, it needs to be relevant to the role and the company and like why you're applying for that role, why you care about like sort of the direction that they're going. I like to tell people like that summary should really be a summary of your cover letter, where the first paragraph is about you, the second paragraph is about your skills that you're bringing to that job, and the third is like re-emphasizing why you're headed in the same direction as the company and they should call you. You're going to summarize each of those paragraphs into one sentence, and those 3 sentences become your summary on your resume. And so it starts off with like who you are, the skills that you have that are super important, and then like why they should call you because you're super qualified for this particular role. That would be a good way of like bringing that cover letter into the resume and kind of tie those 2 pieces together. That's what I would typically tell people.
Yeah, that's cool. It's fun to learn from you as well, Ian. I'm kind of the opinion to just leave the summary off altogether and have that information be woven into the resume. But I think you bring up some really good points. I'm actually rethinking the way I think about the summary. So thank you.
Well, but again, everybody's different. But for me, I think a lot of people that look at a resume, they're looking at it with the mindset of why should I call this person for this role? And if I'm looking for a specific kind of person, specific technical skills or soft skills or whatever skills, I need to see that in a hurry, and I need to see like where did you learn it, where have you used it, where have you applied it, or like how have you developed that over time? Has there been a progression in that skill over time? Like, can I find that easily to go, yes, this person is clearly qualified. I'm going to like add them to my, list of people to call. Because again, when I'm looking at these resumes, I'm looking for a reason to say no. And if I can't find a clear reason why I should call you, then you're not going to get a call. Cool. I think we might wrap up there. We've been going on for a minute. I think we'll save the other resume for another time. But Katherine, really appreciate your time. Appreciate your perspectives on things, for teaching us all about LinkedIn. Thanks for spending some time with us.